I was having some tech issues and I got logged into my work Zoom. Excuse me while I fix that. I'll be right back.
So once again, I have video issues because I am so not savvy with computers. I should be, but I'm not.
Hello.
We're just waiting on Lakeisha to get back. If we can give it just a couple of minutes.
Okay, I was just like,
You're
Who's-
good. You're
who's
good.
gonna let me in?
There she is coming back in.
Hello, friends. I finally got my tech issues worked out for now. I know we had a few people who had some more trouble with links. Want to make sure we've got quorum. All right, I think we have our quorum. Do I see Chuck? I found Lori and Amy. There's our friend Chuck. Yay, just took a minute for us to get situated there. Thanks everyone for joining. Sorry about those technical glitches to begin with. I'd love to have a motion to call the meeting to order.
I move we
will-
call the meeting to order.
And
a
I will second it.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor? Fantastic. We are officially called to order. We don't have the April minutes handy, so sorry for that, but we will make sure that that gets in place by our next meeting so that we can approve those. So let's move on to our visiting speakers. Let me make sure I've got my names together. Give me one moment. All righty. Do we have Ms. Esther Lujan? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I am here.
Fantastic. And are you okay going ahead to speak first?
All right, sure.
All right, I just wanted to let you know, you have 2 minutes to speak, and I apologize in advance if I have to cut you off. I don't like to interrupt people with a 10-second warning. Feel free to set your own timer if that helps. Just make sure that you don't say anything that might break any confidentiality in terms of names and that sort of thing. All right, I'm ready when you are.
All right, my name is Esther Lujan. I have been a parent at CFCI since 2011. I have 3 children that began their journey at CFCI starting in kindergarten. My oldest child finished CFCI 2 years ago. My second child is currently in 2nd grade, and my youngest child is in kindergarten. For the past 11 years, I have witnessed the transition of 3 different administrations, going from Mr. Corrigan to Ms. Roy to Ms. McCormick to now Ms. View. This is the first time that I'm very concerned about all the incidents that have affected our children in the second grade, including my own child. During this school year, I was in communication with the teacher on various occasions, especially because my child would sometimes come home crying. Within a week, I realized that there was something going on in the classroom. I understand that many incidents that occurred in the classroom cannot be disclosed to other parents due to privacy and FERPA laws. However, this is my current concern. At what point is it really a privacy issue if my own child is being a witness, meaning that she is day after day actively seeing, experiencing, feeling, and being subject to different acts that range from bullying to listening to obscene or profane language, and unfortunately to see situations in which assault has occurred. This is the tragic reality that not just me, but that more than 15 parents have confirmed to each other by email, one by one, in which each one has shared their own story about what has happened through the year. We're now being and becoming united. At some point, we thought that this was just a coincidence, but it was not. To make matters worse, we realized that the teacher was put on administrative leave the day before spring break. How convenient to do it at that time. Maybe CFCI thought that it was best to use these 2 weeks to figure out a plan. I'm not sure. I understand that personal actions cannot be shared with parents. However, not communicating with parents for 22 days, letting them know that there was a substitute teacher, not their own teacher, is not acceptable. I'm disappointed that I've been.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt.
Has not led me to
Your
lose
2 minutes are
administration.
now up.
In this meeting, Ms. View claimed that she was not aware that there was any behavior issues.
I know there's a lag there. Sorry about that. I'm so sorry again to have to interrupt. That 2-minute time frame did go by rather quickly. I still thank you for that. And if you would like to submit that in writing for the piece that you didn't get to, we definitely encourage you to do that. All right, I want to give our next speaker a chance. I have Lance Atkins. Again, apologies if I mispronounced the name.
It's okay. It's Atkins. But you're good. Everyone. Good.
Atkins. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I am ready when you are.
Okay, we're gonna go. Boom. Hello, my name is Lance Atkins. My daughter goes to CFCI. She's also in the same classroom that we've had the transgressions. I just have an issue that it seems like this is ongoing, has been ongoing. It's not going to stop. It's a disruption to the learning of all the children. And she witnessed a violent act to where we were going to be, or we're supposed to be notified. I was notified by parents. And then when I got home, and then when I finally was notified by the school, it was a good period of time after the transgression had happened. And once again, what I was notified on was minor compared to what had happened with what had transpired with the student and the teacher. I've talked to my daughter. She has told me that there's been other instances. This has been brought up. It's been talked about. She is fearful of the student that has brought about the transgressions to other students. And it's a situation where my child is trying to avoid someone in their class. And I'm curious as to how long this will continue, if this is going to continue into the next grade, because I know that the 3rd and 4th grade platforms are very, very, very definitive for the learning of a child, especially when it comes to math and science. So if we're having all these interruptions in class this year, are we to expect the same interruptions again next year? And I'd like to get a definite answer so I can know if I need to start looking for another school for my child. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. 24 seconds left. Bam.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Again, apologies for mispronouncing your name before.
All good.
All right, next on the list, I have Lindsay, and I do not want to make a mistake with your last name.
Macchio, it's fine.
Macchio. Thank you for joining us. I am ready whenever you are. I won't start the clock until you start speaking.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start off where the first speaker left off because she cut out.
Okay.
So the teacher wound up leaving the property and we were not informed until 22 days later when the teacher sent us a message, and she told us to just speak to our kids basically about what was going on, and I was very concerned. After that email, the director sent an email stating that changes in the classroom followed by a meeting that was optional to attend and discuss what's going on in the classroom. After speaking with our children that evening, we were mortified and disgusted with what we were hearing. I waited until the meeting to see if other parents were having the same issues. It turns out the majority of the classroom has fallen victim to a certain student's behavior, including the teachers. After the meeting, the director followed up by a written statement that all parents would be basically notified immediately if something happened to their children. It wasn't until 11 days later, my child came home and said that there was a huge incident at school today, leading to a child getting punched and a teacher being called disgusting names and also physically harmed. After clarifying with the other parents that this event did in fact happen, we were not notified yet again. Parents and personal observations state that some students have started to model some of this behavior. My son has come home with work that is not completed. Letters are backwards. His writing and skills have definitely depleted tremendously. It seems to me that the teachers in the classroom are more focused on the constant distraction and possibly overwhelmed with the behavior, that they are not able to perform their regular routines. I have fear for our children that they are not ready for the third grade with all of this going on. I think that there is a lack of communication with the administrative, the director, to the parents. I voiced my concerns about my child having to leave the school, and the director wrote one sentence to me stating that I had to do what I had to do as a parent, which I do not think that that was the correct thing to do. Instead of fighting for a student to stay, she was just more than willing to just let him go. I believe that they're robbed of their education and leaving some students.
Lindsay, I have
damaged.
to interrupt you. Sorry. That was my timer going off. Again, if you have
Yes.
more that you would like to put into writing in order to make sure you get all that in.
Oh, yes, I have that and more. Yes, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right, and next we have a staff member, Miss Joanne. And I will start the clock whenever you start.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I ask you to consider one of the founding principles of our school, shared leadership. Shared leadership is a way of empowering faculty and staff to help make decisions that affect the way our school works, grows, and changes. It is an invitation for faculty to assume responsibility beyond their own classrooms. It is the leadership of many for common purposes. It requires communication, a culture of trust, commitment, and a willingness to put in the time needed, even when it seems unfruitful. It results in our faculty feeling valued and respected. It creates an environment where people are supported by many and where a high level of collegiality is the norm. For 22 years, our school has continued working toward a shared leadership model. It is as foundational to who we are as inquiry in the social curriculum. It sets us apart from other public schools and faculties. As a member of our board, I ask you to continue to support a shared leadership model at CFCI. When decisions are made, ask questions. What process was followed when making this decision? What things were considered? Understand how and why the decision was made. Shared leadership does work. With strong leadership and support, CFCI can continue to be the best school with the best teachers and staff, the best students, and the most committed families. Thank you for your time and your service to our students, teachers, staff, and families.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you to all of our speakers this evening. Lujan, Atkins, and Miss Lindsay Macchio. Again, apologies for those I had to cut off, but please don't hesitate to put some things in writing to send to us. All right. Moving on our agenda, our guest speakers, aside from Miss Joanne, can log off so we can move on to our next item, which, if I'm not mistaken, I can't quite see. I think that's finance. from Danielle and Rose. Mr. Rose?
Hey, everybody. Actually, Robin is here with us from Acadia, and she will be going over the numbers for us as well as next year's budget. So, Robin, please feel free to step on in.
So, good evening, everybody. Do you want to start with the April budget, or do you want to start with the 2022-2023 budget?
Let's start with the April budget, and
Okay.
then we'll move on. That way, at least we keep it in order.
Did you want me to share my screen, Robin, or did you want to share yours?
You share yours if that's easier. You know, we've done this before. I struggle to share a screen.
Okay. I think I have it open here. Nope, that's not the right one. Okay, this is April's condensed budget here.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna have it. Okay, so let me get my little screen over here. So basically, we've made quite a few changes. We've reclassed some items and everything. So if truly we were to end the day today, and Danielle's cruising right along here, we would if we stayed within our budget, we would have a $27,000 deficit, knowing that we have, and hold on, let me pull this number up on my screen, a fund balance of roughly 1.3 million. So we would, in the year with 27,000, we have 1.33 million, and then we would end the year in 1.302. So we're doing good as far as, you know, trying to balance everything that goes in. I know that Danielle and I talked as far as the board. I'm sorry. We had 100,000 that we were using for, you know, old items that we were doing. We had the blue clay that we sold. So there's a few items that we have increased our fund balance. But at the end of the day, I think we are in a positive state as far as also knowing that even though we said 27,000 is a deficit, in reality, we also had to deal with the state that has upped the supplements and up the salary scale. So you have a lot of that you have to take into account, which I hope the board does understand that, you know, that difference. And then going forward, if we were to close, or we're not closing, but we will hopefully end the year in $1.3 million, which I think is great considering what, you know, where we started and what we planned.
So Robin, I have a question in regards to some of the line items that are showing a percentage that it's still remaining for the grants. So
Okay.
is that anticipated to be at 0 by the end of the fiscal year?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm looking at Danielle's screen, so I don't know which one you're looking at. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm looking at the percentage that's remaining, and I was
Okay.
looking at the grants, and of course, background, I specifically zero in, and looking at the fact that, is that a percentage that will be used up?
If you're talking about the federal, a lot of those
Those
ESSER
grants.
grants, is that right there? Is that the screen? Is that
For
what
example, there's the behavior grant and the IDA grants.
I'm sorry, I'm watching her screen. I don't.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't
All right,
mean
at
to
the
be confusing you,
at
but
the
I don't
very-
know where she's looking.
Yeah, the very top, Danielle,
Yeah.
it says state revenue.
Yes.
And the first
so-
one is the behavior, the 029 grant. And
Yes.
then there's the IDEA grant, which is usually 611. And they
Okay.
have percentages remaining. So will those be used up and be at zero by the end of the fiscal year?
So anything that's in state revenue, like if you're looking at a screen right now,
Right?
anything in the top that says state revenue, that has to be spent by June 30th. Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right.
Yeah. And then if you, Danielle, if you go from state to local and then go to federal, that pot of monies, they have a 27 month lifespan. So we're okay on those. And then some of that ESSER has like even further than that, like especially
Okay.
for one, yeah. So our goal is to first always spend state and then tackle federal and then local, regardless, you will always be able to carry that over. That's what
All right.
the
Yeah, because I
local,
was thinking that the state and the federal had to be spent. So that's what I was asking.
yes, yeah.
Okay, good.
State absolutely has to be spent 12 months, boom, June 30th, done. Local, we can carry over year to year,
That's the
which is how
carryover.
you build your fund balance. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I have two questions. My internet's kind of weird, so somebody text me if I cut out. I'll just say the two questions and you can answer. The first one is, do we know exactly, I'm assuming, that where that deficit came from? Is it from the supplements, and can that be avoided next year? And then the second one is, I think there's plans for being very specific about where the blue clay money is going and what the plan is for that. So I think there needs to be a specific plan, something put in place, because I don't want that money to just be sitting there like, oh, we can borrow it, we have that money. The idea was we earned that money, we were going to have it and have a set plan for, I think, making money off of the money. So next month is my last month on the board. So I just want to throw that out there as far as what's the plan for the plan. So that was my two questions.
Okay, so that would be the school's question.
Yeah, so Sarah, the first question was about avoiding the surprise not budgeted supplements. And what some schools do actually is they have a policy that they don't pay them out if there's a change after they budget. Some other charter schools will do is they don't pay those out until the following year when they budget for them. We chose not to do that and to pay them out. So the only way to avoid that would be to have a similar policy.
So that 27 was from the supplement. That's correct. That was
I don't know
from
the
supplement?
exact numbers, but it might actually be less than that. It
Okay.
might have been actually more than that.
I was just making sure that's where that deficit, like if that actually the deficit, the 27 was because of supplement, or is it the supplement and other things created the deficit?
I can get back to you on exactly where it came from, but I know that we did not budget for the supplements, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was more than 27.
Okay. I just want
I
to
can
make
get
sure we
back to you
know.
with the exact number.
Yeah, if we're running deficits, I think it's important for us to know where that money went and how to avoid that for next year.
Sure.
And then your second question, Sarah, was about the blue clay and planning for that and holding that money. If I'm not mistaken, well, I am hands down sure that that money was not included in the budget for the 2022-2023 year. So last year they budgeted, CFCI budgeted for, do we want to, I'm sorry, maybe you need to vote on the budget or whatever you do before we get to the 2022-2023. I mean, you tell me and then I'll keep talking.
Usually if there's no more questions for this, we can move on to the next one, which would be voted on.
Okay. So with the 2022, 2023, we budgeted a zero net surplus balance budget. Nothing of the blue clay was utilized in that budget. So as far as the concern that Sarah, you had regarding utilizing that money, if they adhere to their budget that the board will vote on, then you would not have utilized any of those funds for the fund balance. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I have on the screen now the 22-23 budget proposal that has to be signed by the chair and voted on by the board. So if there's questions on this one for Robin.
I have a quick question. The DHHS health grant, was that the grant money that we got to help with not only a nurse, but also the COVID pilot program and all that?
Yeah, we got around 196,000, I think, and we're able to roll over 58,000 of it into next year's budget. So the reason why it only says 45 there is because the other part of the money is used for, it appears in benefits and things. Actually, because this is expenses, you would see the total revenue from that is 58.
What do you mean when you say the total revenue is 58?
So here you'll see 45 in expenses, but really the expenses are more money is coming out of that DHH health grant that is listed there, but the money is pulling out of benefits. So there's 58 coming in as revenue that we're rolling over, that's left over from that grant. And that money is being spent on a nurse 30 hours a week and benefits for the nurse.
So the nurse is full-time at 30 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
Lakeisha, on that, with the DHHS grant, to date, we have received just for the past couple of weeks, our very first reimbursement for what we've submitted. And that was a little over 12,000. So it's one of those things, unfortunately, we just have to kind of check the mailbox because nobody's willing to commit when payouts will occur.
Yeah, and just in the school's defense, so in this CFCI is not the only school. We have several schools that they have kind of, for lack of a better word, dropped the ball. So the school is kind of spending the money in advance and then requesting reimbursement. So a lot of that money is spent and then patiently waiting for the money. So hopefully the system with DHHS will get better.
Okay. And until that money gets reimbursed, where does it actually come from?
Robin, can you answer that question?
It's a federal grant that comes through the state. So it's from the Department of Health and Human Services. So it's a specific grant that the school applied for.
I think Robin, I think what she's asking is, so if we have to pay it out first, what line items is it coming out, or is the money coming from?
Gotcha. You're having to utilize your local monies that you have, your fund, quote unquote, fund balance, to spend that money, which would reduce your bank balance. And then of course you would get reimbursed and then it would go back into your bank account.
Gotcha.
We will not use state or federal dollars for anything that pertains to that grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume that's because if for some reason we don't get reimbursed, we don't want state money tied into that.
Yeah, you don't want to be double dipping, for
Right.
lack of a better word. Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Claire, or naive question here from the budget. I noticed that there's no contingency funds listed, yet this year we're under budget 27,000. So we know that it's possible that we can be in the red. Historically, have we always had zero in the contingency funds area? And just curious if that is the case. And obviously it's balanced to zero, so something must be up and being able to be put up and down in order. So basically something's being funded instead of being put in contingency funds. I'm just curious what's going on there. Do
I
we
think
know?
Chuck's- Oh, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Oh, okay. I think, and Robin can correct me if I'm wrong, that the contingency funds line was where we put the blue clay sale money. So that's the line item that we took in the revenue and placed it. And then we had an equal line where we had the expenses come out so that we didn't spend it. Am I right, Robin?
Yes, ma'am. So let's think about it. Let's think about it this way. So like if you go back up to page 1, I'm assuming you're looking at the detail. No, I'm looking at the,
Where do you want me to go?
that's fine. The condensed, that's fine.
Okay.
So if you look back, scroll back down to page 1. So in our mind, think about the board approved to say, hey, we're going to approve, you see that fund balance capital campaign of our fund balance, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a sign. No, the next one down, 12,617.
Yeah.
So let's think about in retrospect. In order to balance your budget, the board approved to spend $12,617.70 on a sign. So the expense is down there at the bottom. Same concept, sale of fixed asset. We know we brought in 880,000. Keeping in mind that we had expenses, your operating expenses, you had to pay the attorney, fast forward. That is offset just to make sure we don't spend that money. And then the $100,000 that we're planning was for the additional, I think it was painting. I think it was different renovations that the board approved that we would use that money from last year to this year. So roll back up to the end.
Down on this sheet, on this
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. And so if you see, you can see that 815 contingency funds. That is the difference of the 880 less the 815. We had expenses that the school had to pay for that. Everything else, that 100,000 and the 12,000 is stuck in that facilities line, that 174. So we've accounted for anything that we thought we would pull in from last year's money, and the board approved. That 27,000 in the hole is over and above what the board approved. And it's mainly due, like Danielle said, due to the supplements. The state approved or redid the salary scale. So here's the new salaries that you're having to pay.
Chuck, did that answer your question?
Well, I'm just still curious why in this proposed budget, there's zero in the contingency fund.
Oh, okay. So now we're in the,
I'm not sure what the history was, if that was something that would normally went into the budget, or if that was the line that we decided to add in order to account for the sale of the property. Robin, do you know?
oh,
So that's something we could look into. Kim, would you happen to know if there was?
It would
When you
make
talk
sense.
about proposed, Chuck, are you talking about the 22-23 one?
Yes.
Or
Yes,
the
this document right here with the title Projected Budget 22-23.
projected?
Robin, see how there's nothing under two different lines and one of
Yeah.
them is the contingency funds.
Right. So what they're basically, if this budget, so let's think about it in a big perspective. Does the board want to utilize any of those contingency funds that you carry every year to year, which is that 1.3, to do more planning, building, or whatever? Then you would put it there, but you would also put it in the revenue.
All right, I think I understand now. I thought that contingency funds would be from this large number of $4,667,000. Amongst that, some of that would be used as contingency, figuring that it's possible things move around,
Yeah.
versus using savings of some other thing. So that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I
think
thought it was
about
like a,
this as 22-23. Pretend like you don't have any money in the bank. This is how we think you're gonna function next year. Granted,
If we didn't have a significant cash, a reasonable amount of cash on hand, then maybe you look at
Yeah.
intentionally budgeting kind of a buffer or something like that.
Mhm.
But we have funds on hand. If we did encounter a contingency, we do have revenue or do have funds.
and you may say, oh my goodness, we've got to replace the roof, or we've got to do whatever. You have that contingency, but this is saying, let's just traditionally focus on 22-23. No plans to build anything, no plans to fix anything. Here's where we are. And then you always have that buffer, like you said, Stephen, is.
Kim, go ahead. I see you.
Sorry. So Robin, I just want to clarify. At the end of last year, we had, I think it was like $1.3 million. We
Mhm.
sold the property. We had, like at least 700 something went into that. So to me, I'm thinking we should have like 2 million. Are you saying that we don't have $2 million
No.
aside from all the money that we need to spend on our bills and everything? When we end this year, you're saying we're only going to have $1.3 million, including the blue clay money?
I'm saying if we shut the doors today, we would have 1.3 million. If you ended the year, you see that on the screen. Right now, that's 2.4 million. But let's just say that, yeah, right now in the bank, you have 2.4 million.
That's with the blue clay money.
Yes, ma'am. But if you spend every dime that you plan to spend for the rest of the year, and you bring in every dime that you plan to collect, then you will end the year with 1.3 million.
In that fund.
Yes, but also
Apart from the other money, yes.
I'm sorry, say it again.
No, I think it gets confusing when you say if you close the doors, we'd have 1.3 because of the fact that it doesn't count the money that's in all the other accounts, which if all in total is around, according to this, 2.429.
Yeah, if you shut the doors today and you never paid another dime, you would have 2.4 million.
Okay. I think that was what was confusing, I think.
Yeah. But if you, like I said, so your current budget, here's the confusion is if you have to make sure that like that 27,000, if we brought in every penny and spent every dime out, then we would be 27 less than the wherever it went. Sorry, I should be in control of the screen.
Sorry, what did you want me to do, Robin?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
If we were anticipated position, if you spent every dime out, brought every dime in that is in the current budget, then at the end of the day, you would have an anticipated position of 1.3 million.
But that doesn't, I'm sorry, guys, budgets are not my forte. But that doesn't really answer what Kim just asked. So I don't get.
We'll have about 2.1 million on hand. It'll be the 1.3 from the reserve plus 800 and from the blue clay. Is that right? Because if
But
it's
that's not what this-
1.3 only, that's a problem, but it's 1.3 plus 800, right?
Where is,
Danielle's shaking her head. Yes, I'm thinking that as a
Well,
confidence
you
feature.
see 760 plus 1.382.
There you
And
go.
then there's
Yes, I was
another account that has
ballparking that.
273 in it.
Yeah, so somewhere in that area.
okay.
Kim, do you still, did we, I'm,
Why at the end of the day, if we get all the money and we spend all the money, then why at the end of the day, is it not 2, but rather 1.3?
It is 2.
But that's not what she just said.
No,
Well,
it's
all
not.
together. If you lump everything together, it's just in the regular, taking blue clay out of the picture.
But that's not,
But
but that's
no.
not what Robin said. That's not
No.
what Robin said.
Okay.
I don't think. I think she's saying if all of it is put together, we would end up right now with all the bills paid, 1.3 million, including blue clay, including everything. Is that what you're saying, Robin?
Okay, so let's think about it like this. So
It's kind
year
of a
to
yes or
date,
no thing. I mean, is it like? Is it
Can I
new
step
or-
in? Are you guys, when you're saying 1.3 million, referring to revenue?
No, fund balance.
money in the bank.
Okay, because I just feel like there's like a difference
Right.
between the balance sheet being the point in time and then the budget showing, I don't know, I mean, actual expenses netting out.
I mean, I think the
Asset.
key is just like cash on hand at the end of the year should be, in my mind, unless I'm just total all across all accounts, 2.1-ish.
Yes, yes,
Is that accurate?
yes.
Okay.
What we're doing right now is we're working with, hey,
Right.
what's
Now
gonna
I got
happen?
yeah. All this other stuff is the blue clay is like a separate thing. So but
Yeah.
that when you talk about 1.3, you're not talking about blue clay, you're talking about the regular fund balance,
Right.
excluding blue clay. I think that's what was the clarification I think we were trying to get. 'Cause
Yeah,
if we were only at 1.3, including blue clay, we've got some things we need to talk about.
mhm.
I'm going to be the unpopular one here and ask that we push this to June because I need to get this sorted in my head and maybe have someone. I don't feel like it should be this hard to understand. I've dealt with budgets before and I don't like them and they make me glaze over, but I've understood them and this
What
is.
might be useful would be a short like summary. I mean, like a
Okay.
presentation, almost like a little slide
Yeah.
deck of 3 slides, something like that. That I mean, I'm
Visual.
okay with looking at the spreadsheet. I'm okay. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's still some, of course, there's some confusion, which I understand. So I would recommend,
So
I don't even know necessarily this is like what we should be looking at even during a regular board meeting, as much as looking at a summary and then having this as a kind of a secondary
Right. I
thing
agree.
to look at.
right, and we have one more month of school.
Yep.
So we know that we have one more month of payroll and that. So, I mean, I can project that and tell you, hey, here's what I anticipate, assuming that the total expenses for the month of April is the same as May, is the same as June. And just kind of give you an idea if that helps. and kind of summarize it in a smaller capacity. Would that?
I do just want to point out that we're looking at two different things, though. We're looking at the April budget, and the questions that you're asking are about this year's budget. And then the sheet that I have up right now is next year's proposed budget. And this is exactly what was presented last year to the board for vote. And I included more detail, and Amy, if you guys need more time, that's totally understandable to look through that detail and then ask questions. That's not a problem. But I just don't want people to get confused between trying to understand April's budget and thinking that's related to what you're looking at now.
I got you,
Okay,
but I still need more time.
that's fine. I mean, it's not up to me, it's up to all of you.
Well, and it's definitely not up to me. If you want to take the time and tell me what you need, I will be more than happy to provide any numbers that you need. I just need to know. And again, like Amy said, and Stephen said, and Chuck said, you know, you look at it in a different perspective. You tell me what you want, and I will make sure I can provide the numbers to somewhat make it have more clarity.
So why don't I collect questions, and then we can come back to the next board meeting with the summary that they're looking for.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Or even before then, I mean, that's up to everybody. I mean, you just tell me what I need to provide to you, and then I will make sure I get the numbers to you.
If we can submit this to you, Danielle, and then get that before the board meeting, then it's not on the spot like this. And
yeah, I'm having an anxiety attack.
I am too. Like, I'm just like, I feel really dumb right now, but
Like, Keisha, stop it.
Okay, so we'll get it ahead of time, get it back to you ahead of time, at least a week in advance.
And I'm kind of like Amy. I am not exactly in love with budgets and all that. Is not my jam. Sometimes it does make me break out in hives a little bit. But I don't know if Finance Committee has already met and discussed all this or not. My thought was I wouldn't mind trying to sit in on one of those meetings if it was going to be hashed out there, to try and wrap my mind around some things between now and next meeting, to see if that would help. Not that I'm inviting myself, of course, just.
Please come.
You're always
Absolutely.
welcome.
It is very difficult to understand. I thought I understood all of it and I was fine, and now my head is spinning and I'm not even sure what we're talking about, to be quite honest.
Okay.
And I've been sitting in those meetings, so.
So just to sort of simplify a little bit, what I'm hearing as I listen to the conversation is that we want to be sure that total funding that is going to be coming to us by way of federal funds, state funds, and local funds, along with the additional funds that we have as a result of the sale of the property of Blue Clay, are reflected in what we're seeing in the numbers, so that bottom line, we understand the total amount of monies that we may be operating off of. But what it also seems like is that the projected budget does not include the Blue Clay funding, that is separate. Is that correct? Okay, yes. So that is separate.
That's
so
what I understand.
to look at the budget for next year and think that you're going to see the total, including Blue Clay, is wrong. The total should simply be federal funds, state funds, and local funds. And that the Blue Clay funding is set aside separately.
That's right.
Does that make sense? Because you're not supposed to see the Blue Clay funds added in to the projected 22-23 budget.
I noticed.
Unless you were going to turn around and use it for something.
Correct.
You would see
Unless
it
there was a
like
plan for
Robin
that.
mentioned,
Correct.
as
Right,
as
so,
both a revenue and
yeah.
an expense, but we're not doing that, at least at the moment.
So it just says, say suspended in this little pot on the side until we finally have a plan.
Right. And the projected budget is all of the line items that are spent for salaries and to run the school and for student supplies and all the items that we see as being necessary for the school to function as a school.
So let me ask you, let me think about it in a different perspective. So in fiscal year 21, you started with, sorry, I'm trying to play with my little computer. No, let me get back. Hold on. Bear with me. All right, so let's assume I'm sorry, bear with me for a second.
No, take your time.
So last year, fiscal year 21, 22, you had 1.4 million, right? When you ended the year. Of which you utilized 100,000 of that and another 12,000 to finish your renovations. So true remaining fund balance was 1.3. If you stick to the budget, you're going to end the year at 1.3. So I think that's where we're off, is the fact that the money came in. I think the blue clay is what's throwing everybody off. So let me look into that and see if I can.
How is blue clay different than the fund? Like our fund money? Like why? I don't.
I think of it like a checking and a savings account. Like the 1.38 is like your checking account that you're using all the time for your expenses. Your revenues coming in that place and your expenses going out of that place. The blue clay money we put in we opened a separate account, like a savings account, to keep it separate.
I'm thinking about the money that we have in a pot over here, not blue clay, just the money that we have in
all of it.
Not our operating expenses, or maybe I'm confused. I thought
The fund balance.
The fund balance, right?
Fund balance.
Fund balance. I don't understand why blue clay isn't a part of the fund balance. It would just simplify things for me. But I remember the discussion. I remember there being a reason. I don't know what that is now.
No, I remember
It's there
what
under
you're talking
assets, right? I mean, is that
about.
not is MM True 7591? Is that not the blue clay money under assets?
That's a money market.
No, I'm not. I mean, I know, but it's $760,000. It's about the right amount. Is that not technically the blue clay money? Because it all goes into the two. If you add all this stuff up, you get the 2.4 million, which is the right number for all total cash on hand, no matter what type of account we're talking about.
Yeah, so you spent, of that 880 that you brought in.
Yep.
You spent 60, let's just round it up, 65,000 in admin cost. So of that blue clay, we're carrying over another 800 and something thousand. I'm sorry, 815.
815.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I would like to just motion, I mean, can we just make a motion to just consider in the June meeting so we can, just so we can
And I will,
move along?
hands down, you tell me if you want to give Danielle the questions, pop them to her. I will definitely dig and try to answer the different scenarios.
Personally, I'm okay after a moment of confusion, but if Amy would like to have a moment to I'm happy to yield.
I need a moment, Stephen.
I can give you a whole month. We can give you a whole month worth of moments.
Right? I'll give you whatever you need, girl.
Yeah.
That's right. To go back to Amy's question about like remembering this discussion, but not remembering why we did it separate. And anybody can definitely please chime in if you remember something different. But I seem to remember that we agreed to do it that way because we want to be very cognizant of how we spent that money and make a plan and that sort of thing. So we didn't want it mingling too much with other monies. We want to be really, like responsible and make sure that that money didn't really get touched until we had a good plan in place, because we didn't want to do something that wasn't sustainable, that sort of thing. That's how I remember it.
Did we ever decide when we're gonna like come up with that plan?
I can tell you, I'm
Must have
sorry.
been worked on this year.
I can tell you how it would have been non-transparent is regardless when that money came in this fiscal year, we just showed 880,000. Your budget would look like you had way a lot of money. So we decided, or the board decided, let's back up and say, hey, we're going to add this expense that offsets that so that it doesn't look like transparent wise that you are, for lack of a better word, rocketing this money and have a cash cow per se. So that's why we offset that contingency fund as an expense to say, okay, 880 came in, but we spent 65,000. And so here's the 18 and that they offset per se. Just so that it doesn't look like you have, another 880,000 that's just play money. Next year, the budget that the 22-23 will not show all this, it'll just be a fund balance per se. Claire's mud. Yeah. Lakeisha's looking at me like, yeah.
But if there's a plan, Robin, that rolls out how that money is intended to be spent. And I think that's what I remember we had talked about doing, was putting together a plan, having a committee, putting together a plan that it doesn't have to all be spent at one time. A portion could be spent one year. We can roll it out for however many years it's wanted to be, rolled out. But for those things that the school deems as, it may be for more playground equipment. I remember that as being one particular item. Different projects, whatever that should be, but that this is as you were saying, a savings account fund that we can use for our vacation, or we can use for, paying for a trip to grandma's, next year or whatever. But it's the kind of thing that we use for those extra things.
Yeah, kind of like the 100,000 that we had to finish the project for last year that what didn't happen, or the sign, so you can say, hey, of the contingency of 1.3 or whatever it is, we're going to plan on 200 we're going to pave the parking lot, or we're going to, whatever it is. That's what that purpose is.
Right.
And the board has to decide, what do we want to utilize that 815 that we carried over because we sold the blue clay? And even the money that we inherit, not we, CFCI has accumulated contingency wise over the years. What do you want to do with that money? that's the purpose of that. But we wanted to be able to say, from a board standpoint, I don't want you to present a budget that says, hey, your contingency net surplus is 800 and something thousand, when in reality, you want to hold those funds for next year or 5 years or whatever. Big plans.
Part of our discussion was around trying to see ways we could invest that money to try to increase it, to use it for projects, or to have it on the back burner for when the next project happens that we don't anticipate, like the new parking lot did. So that we could build that fund balance back, because building that parking lot pretty much wiped us out of our really nice, comfortable cushion that we usually have. But I don't know where that discussion about investments has gone. But that was one of the ideas.
Well, that was my original point when we started this, was that needs to be something that the board is looking for. And I guess that's part of finances work. That's part of the committee work. Like Joanne, you were talking about at the beginning of the meeting, with shared leadership that starts at the ground, and the school talks about that. Teachers, admin, leadership group brings to the board, here's where we need to grow this from. So that's the forward thinking, forward planning.
Now that we're thoroughly confused, I'm trying to decide between A and B. That kind of leads me into some of the discussion we've talked about with the blue clay money and how the plan is for that and all that good stuff. That reminds me of the email and the agenda item about the flooring. So I wanted to know if the money for the flooring that we're going to need to vote on is going to be, is that amount of money at all going to be reimbursed from somewhere else? It just seems like a big chunk of money from that blue clay money to use in one big swoop, but I could be wrong. I have no idea what flooring costs for a school our size, so I guess
Lakeisha, I appreciate the segue into that. And I will admit, I was far more confident in my presentation regarding the flooring prior to this conversation than I am now. But
you're welcome.
I will move forward, and that way you guys can have an opportunity to discuss. The board was presented with a breakdown of what this flooring project would cost and the details that go along with that, based on our activities with the finance committee since the last board meeting when it was first introduced, where the flooring would come from and be paid for. So we have decided on a contractor with the finance committee. That quote comes in at $198,100 for a complete redo of all flooring on campus in the main building, as well as the gym. I should specify in the gym, it will cover the music rooms, the narrow hallway, and the offices in the gym as well. The bathrooms, the student bathrooms, will remain tiled. So that process has been ongoing to get this project started since last year. And we have gotten to the last leg other than simply requesting those funds. The project could start as soon as June 20th. The week of June 20th is expected to run about 3 weeks plus a few days. As it stands right now, we have been requesting that they keep the product that we've selected on hold because of manufacturing demand. There is not a lot of flooring out there available for the size of project we need in an affordable product line. And we did manage to find one that they have on hold temporarily for us to get the project started on time in order for us to have a week to 2 weeks of cushion prior to the teachers returning in August. It takes 7 to 10 days to get delivery of the product, which will remain at their warehouse until they're good to go. The process will begin with a 6-day work week, working 12 to 14 hours. The contractor will manage moving, furnishings. There will be some aspects of that teachers and staff will need to assist with prior to, just making sure some cabinets are reduced enough in volume that they can physically be picked up. And then of course, any items that need to be, protected, anything that people want to ensure doesn't get misplaced or damaged by accident, that will need to be boxed up and taken care of. So that's the long and the short of that contract that we have. I did speak with Acadia about this. We are able, there's about 13,000, just shy of 13,000 in taxes that we would pay in this. We are able to request reimbursement from the state for the product itself. We are not able to request sales tax, if any, is attached to labor. So when that happens, we'd be able to seek some reimbursement. If we are given the go-ahead, the company at that point can provide us a breakdown of what the total cost is compared to compared to product versus labor. And then we can seek that reimbursement from there. With that request, we are requesting that the money do come out of the heavily discussed blue clay funds. There is no opportunity at this point to complete the project without those funds. And Lakeisha, to answer your question specifically, this would not be a reimbursement aspect back into that, not from another source other than we would begin to divert local funding to repay over time, not unlike you would do your personal savings account. If you needed to buy a new appliance and you've saved in your savings from it, and then you go back to the drawing board and pick up from there. So that is where the request is.
So Ben, may I ask a question? So am I hearing right that when the funds for the product itself are reimbursed, that funding that's reimbursed will not go back into the blue clay funds, or it will go back into the blue clay funds?
Wait, I'm sorry about that. Could you repeat that question?
All right. So you had said that it was the cost that was quoted was $198,100, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And of that funding, part of that is the product itself and part of it is labor. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, correct.
All right. So when the state reimburses us for the product portion of that cost, where will those reimbursement funds be placed? Will they be placed back into the blue clay funds?
That is a good question. And yes, it would be good practice to reimburse where it comes from.
Right.
So in that sense, yes, absolutely. Unless, the powers that be decided otherwise,
Right.
it would be designated. In fact, I can tell you, when that check came in from the state, I would do its own deposit slip that would go right into that account that
Okay.
would not touch operating.
Good.
Again, unless told otherwise. So,
Right.
but no, thank you for that clarifying question there, Nancy, but you're absolutely right.
And did you just say the state's reimbursing us for the floors?
No. I wish, but no.
Okay, that's what I didn't think you said that, but it sounded like that's what Nancy thought you said.
No, we as a oh, okay. So sorry. So the way because we are a nonprofit,
Okay.
we are tax exempt for most things.
It's tax.
So it's tax. Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
tax. It's tax, not the flooring.
Not the product itself, but tax. The tax on it. Gotcha.
On the product,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
So it would be the way we do it, instead of having to carry a letter around, or anytime we make a purchase to state that we are a 501(c), what we do is we pay the tax all year long, all sales tax all year long. Then twice a year, and then that tax is part of organizing and payment of bills. The taxes are all separated on sales. Then twice a year, Acadia on our behalf submits all sales taxes that the school has paid for reimbursement, and then the state issues us 2 payments a year in reimbursements.
Well,
so
that makes better sense.
Yeah. And to give you an example on that, I know we're kind of veering off of that, but I just want to make that clear because it does get confusing. We received a check not too long ago for the first part of the year, and that was just over $8,000 in sales tax that we were reimbursed.
Okay.
So, yeah. Any further questions on the flooring?
So I have a question for the board. Excuse me. If you all voted tonight to pay for the floors out of the blue clay money, and we later figured out a different way to go about paying for those floors without touching that money, could we then just do that, or would we need to come back to the board for another vote on how to pay for the floors?
We would, given the amount, we would still come back to the board because it's over 99,000.
Danielle shared with the teacher board the other day an idea of how we could do this differently that I believe we were going to discuss at the faculty meeting tomorrow. And so I'm just wondering if it gets voted tonight and we can figure out a different way to do it rather than dipping into that money when we don't have a plan for that money yet and that hasn't gotten taken care of, if we could do that instead.
I'm not aware of a different an alternative form of payment. So
well, we haven't discussed it with the faculty yet, so I'm hesitant to say anything more here, but it was an odd idea that she brought forward about rethinking something, a grant, one of our grants.
Okay.
Rethinking it and spending it in a different manner. That would mostly cover the floors in combination with the money that we have left from last year that was allocated for the floors that we didn't spend.
I see. Okay.
Joanne, I don't think that we can use the money from that grant for floors because it is earmarked for learning loss. So we could use it for something different than we'd originally asked for, but I'm not positive, or I'm fairly positive that we can't use it for something like flooring.
Seems like I remember a discussion last year where that we could spend that on flooring, that there was a question asked of somebody that knew about the grant. So I would definitely say we should discuss it with the faculty and that we should look into that.
I saw a hand raised somewhere, but I'm not sure. Did someone? Oh. I see you, Kim.
Sorry about that. We definitely could look into it. I remember when we were doing the grant, you're right, Danielle, it's absolutely learning loss, but it was also mitigation of COVID specifically. So I think we'd have to look at it to see if we could change anything in there, but happy to do that.
The only thing I want to mention is if we don't move forward with this, we're going to lose the product and not be able to do this work this summer. And it is something that really needs to be done. And there's been a lot of man hours and time and energy put into researching, and it would be a shame to have to go through this entire process again next summer.
I didn't think I heard that. I was thinking that it sounded like it was an alternative, like go ahead and vote, but if we could get reimbursed for it, I think that's what I heard.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like we could go ahead, but if we could move, if there was that potential and it was decided, then that would be okay. And we should, think about that. That's all, but not
okay.
not postpone the vote.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So then maybe the answer would be could we have a vote that has the wording that, I'm trying to think through this, like approving the purchase of the flooring, but I don't know, maybe contingent upon funding sources. I'm not sure how to do that in a way unless we have just a special meeting later. Like even if we approve the going ahead with the project tonight, having a separate, maybe quick meeting to approve the actual funding. I don't know of a clean, neat way to roll that all into one vote.
I'm not sure if we've ever approved something when it has to come from a specific fund, do we? I thought that was we just approved, and then the administration executors would they would know where. And so I'm more than willing as a board member to meet even in an emergency if necessary to move funding from one to another if it exceeds that $99,000. But I think we should move forward if the project is still worthy according to everyone here.
I will say this, I don't have, I'm trying to figure out how to word this here. As Danielle pointed out, there's been a lot of man hours put into this, and that begins last year with that. And so, well, frankly, I'm not sure what I'm trying to articulate here. Other than, and certainly I don't have an opinion about doing it this year or not doing it this year. But what I can tell you is if, and certainly the board needs to be comfortable with their decision. So by all means, and as do the faculty, because it is a huge chunk of money with that. I can say though that we have exhausted our extensions on the on holding the product. And therefore, if we're not able to if we're not able to move forward now, we won't be able to move forward at all until next year, which is fine if not all parties are comfortable with that expenditure. So
then I think the, if I understand correctly, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it's not that people are uncomfortable with the spending money on the project, but if there's other possibilities to explore, we just want to make sure we explore them, right? So I think it would be, if the board's comfortable to vote and approve funding the project, then tomorrow in our faculty meeting, hopefully tomorrow we can find out if we can actually use that other funding for flooring. If we can, then that can be a discussion at the faculty meeting. Do we want to do that instead of using the blue clay money? And then if we can't use it, it's a null point, right? Like then we have to use the blue clay money, because we don't even know if it's possible, but we could look into it tomorrow and then have a faculty discussion and then decide where to take that money from. It doesn't have to come out of blue clay if the faculty decides they want it to come out of the other grant money. I think I think that was the point that people were making. I think if I understood correctly.
Okay. No, I totally get that. Totally get that. Just, it's one of those things you're like, oh, it's a lot of money. And oh my gosh, there's a deadline. So, but it's a lot of money. So, all right.
And I agree with that. That's what I was thinking. I'm more concerned about finding, other grant funding or whatever it is to pay for the flooring, at least exhausting all those options before we dig into the blue clay money after all that discussion that we've gone over since we got the money and all that good stuff. That was my thoughts too.
No one's asked this question, but I just want the board to know that that money from that grant, the grant was written for those, that money to be spent on 2 buses for the school so that the school could do more experiential learning, get the kids out into the community without having to rely solely on parents. So the money is earmarked for something else. So that, hence the faculty discussion about whether we did have a faculty discussion and voted to get the buses. So this would be in lieu of those buses, just so that you're clear about what we're talking about.
That does help. Is there another plan for buses?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there could be in the future. There's always possibilities. Like we talked about when that grant writer came there. If we decide what we need is transportation, we can look for grants for transportation. If we decide it's facilities, there are grants for facilities. So it's a matter of, if we do one or the other, then we have to go searching if we're not going to use the blue clay money for other sources of funding. And it's not a definite, and some things are a must and some things aren't, right? Like I would say that I love the idea of the buses and how it supports our mission and vision, but I also understand that none of us are going to be having a good experience at school without nice floors or floors that, don't function. So like, I think it's worth seeing what the possibilities are and then having a conversation about it.
And then along the way, putting together what I call a maintenance plan over time, because every building needs a maintenance plan. It just does.
Nancy, to your comment there, I'm glad you brought that up. We will be working on a long-term plan for facilities projects that will spell out what needs to be done, how much. That way it can be budgeted for well in advance.
Okay.
Monies can be saved for it. There's no, we don't find ourselves where we are right now, which is discussing how to pay for something that we need.
Right.
We will have had a number of years to build for these very things. I mean, the fact is, and I'll give you an example. Today we had our fire inspection, all went well. But the emergency lights are quite old. They all have to
Right.
be replaced.
Yeah.
You know, and those are expensive. Thankfully, they're still working. We don't have to run through and light candles in an emergency. But that said, it really does come down to literal and figurative foundation. But that is a project we will be moving forward with. We absolutely cannot afford to do without such a structure.
No. Mm-mm.
So can we make a motion to vote on the floors using the blue clay money unless we find that we're able to use the grant funding and the faculty agrees to that, and then we would move forward with that?
Yes, as long as you make the motion and you do the exact wording.
Nancy, you got that? Don't think I can.
Well, I
say
don't have
that.
all of it. I got part of it.
So will vote to spend the money for flooring from the blue clay funds unless we find that the grant funding can be used to cover the flooring and the faculty agree.
Okay. Do you want us to specify the grant funding, or do you want us to leave it more broad and say, unless we find alternate funding that could support this expenditure?
I would suggest that, because if we're going to rewrite the grant, we could potentially rewrite it to pull some things out of our budget that are going to one place and, as we typically do, move money around to make it fit better, so that, you know, if we got to rewrite it anyway, we could rewrite it that way.
Right. Okay.
But if it's looser, Nancy, then I think that gives us more room to move.
Okay.
Be creative.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So what I've gotten written down here is that we're going to vote to spend monies for flooring from the blue clay funds unless we're able to find alternate funds that will support this expenditure. Is that sufficient?
I think so.
And Tiffany, are you good with that?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Not going to repeat it again, Tiffany? All right, do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Got to scroll through. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carried. We are getting some new flooring, no matter what, this summer. Getting it
Board,
done.
I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen and understand on this. So we will be proud and happy on our new floors. So thank you.
Thank you. We do appreciate all that manpower and patience that is taking and will continue to take. And Ben, didn't remind me, did you say that the company will also take care of moving the furniture?
Yes.
And all that? So
yeah, that's inclusive. Otherwise,
yeah,
you know, let's just continue to put straw down on the floor because nobody wants to move all of that stuff. So yes, they are going to do that.
All right, fantastic. Almost through our finance section. So I guess we just need a motion to move the 22-23 budget review and approval to the June agenda.
I'll
If
motion
everyone's
to
okay
move
with
the budget approval to June meeting.
Second.
And a second on that?
Who is second?
Thank you, Miss Nancy. All right, all those in favor of moving that to the June agenda?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carried. We will put that on our June agenda. Woohoo! All right, Susan, moving on to human resources.
Good evening. My first item is a hiring update. We currently have 2 positions that are open, our grades 2-3 Luke teacher and a part-time Spanish position. We are currently in the interviewing process for both of those positions. So that is the hiring update there. Does anybody have any questions about that? No. Okay, so the next piece looks like policy discussion Q&A. Danielle, I believe, submitted the policy sections 1000 and 2000 to the board for a first reading, understanding that this is not at the approval point just yet. And she wanted to offer an opportunity for the board to have a discussion or any questions that they wanted to pose to the board at large prior to submitting those sections to legal for review.
So I had sent one thought to Danielle after reading over these, and it had to do with the section where faculty was encouraged not to or required not to accept friend requests from students. And I just added in there, should it not be read not just students, but also from parents? Because when you start mixing those lines across the, even adult to adult, it's still mixing the lines of teachers and parents. I think that can get sort of fuzzy at times, particularly if something comes up that is not agreed upon. So that was my only thought.
Okay.
Personally, just Nancy, sometimes, and I'll just speak personally for me, having had kids in the school, I had children who had, like, I taught, Lexa was a younger child, and then I taught her, and so I was friends on Facebook with her friends' parents, and then they were my parents for a year and then moved on. So there may be instances where there's that crossover for a year.
When you have your own children in the school, I can understand
right.
that.
Yeah. So sometimes there's that crossover, but I rarely friend my students' parents. I think
Right.
part of that is public, personal, professional,
right,
drawing your lines.
I just go back a few years
yeah.
and remember where there was an instance that occurred, and there were some issues that surrounded that, and that was probably a good 10 years or more ago. But at any rate, it was something that I just feel like if we can avoid that being a problem, we should think about that.
Right. There was one question got from a faculty member that I wasn't able to bring up at policies and procedures. There was the part about things that were politically sensitive, and it was the question of who is the judge of that. So if it came to something that was perceived as a problem, how would that be judged? So I don't know how you deal with that. Who's the judge as to what's politically appropriate or inappropriate on someone's personal social media site.
That's subjective, I would say. I mean, we've got similar policies at my work. So, I mean, I really don't have a simple answer for that. Not that I am the person you were asking. I assume that was to the whole group, really, but maybe that was meant for Susan.
And we had talked about that, Susan, too. You and I had talked about that. I don't know how a lawyer would respond to that. That may just be something as a side note to get an answer. How is that dealt with?
Right. A lot of these terms are subjective in these policies, and we did discuss getting feedback from our legal advice to determine what the wording should be. And then, of course, as the policy is carried out, that's something that is also subjective, but making the language as tight as possible so that we are less up to interpretation would be ideal. And what one determines politically sensitive, one other person may not determine that politically sensitive. So there's certain that subjectivity level as well. And I apologize, I'm just seeing the video. I'm on my phone and the lighting looks a little strange in the background. I couldn't get on my computer. So if you can't see me, I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. We have definitely mastered a lot of tech issues amongst this crew in the past 2 years and some change.
We just assumed you had the world's largest keyboard.
Or I'm an angel in the background. Oh dear.
Good stuff.
Susan, I do have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I have to get back to the screen where I was. Why is this not? Okay. In section 1000, policy code 1200. There are a lot of words there, and I'm trying to figure out what they actually mean because they're, I don't know. So it says under the duties, the school director shall carry out the policies established by the board of directors and shall be directly responsible to the board of directors. Then it says the school director will have general management of the artistic, academic, and administrative operations of the charter school and shall prescribe and direct the course of study, the discipline to be observed, the assessment of student performance, and shall be responsible for all required reporting to the state of North Carolina. So I get the reporting, I get the assessment. It's those other words in there that I'm not exactly sure in reality what they actually mean. So I don't know, maybe the faculty needs to discuss that more, or maybe somebody else can shed some light on that.
Yes, in terms of shedding light on that, these are the policies that were proposed by the outside agency, some of which are, of course, a part of this policy section. Others are taken directly from current policies that were approved to try to get to a sense of balance in the policies. I understand where you're coming from with the responsibility of the general management of all of those items, and it's something that we can discuss as a faculty for sure if you would prefer to do that before submitting it to our legal counsel.
I think personally that would be a great idea. And then my second question is about section 2000, policy code 2335. Board operations, advanced delivery of meeting materials. In reading this, I'm just wondering if we really want that policy because we're not great at following through with that sometimes. If that's something we want to discuss as a board, if it needs to be changed or altered. I
think that's a good
point. It be that far out because it's a lot easier to read and be prepared, but I don't know if that's always feasible.
And I think that's best practice, but I don't know that it's an actual mandate and required by the governing boards that indicate that. So that's a good question for us to pose to the board in terms of whether or not they'd like to maintain that 7 calendar days. And if not, what's a reasonable time frame, and make sure that our legal counsel does also have input there as well.
Which policy was that again?
2335.
Can I just say that I remember last year when we were looking at that, not so much as a policy, but in terms of what Tom Miller had talked to the board about with looking at the agenda ahead of time. I think, and Danielle, you know how you've done it. giving enough time so that the board can receive it. And then if there are questions prior to, Danielle can get the answers to the questions so that, you know, it's not all the questions at once. I think that's what was talked about last year, ways of streamlining the time in meetings. So if you can get them, I mean, a week is ideal, great. But I mean, a lot of things come up in the week ensuing before the board meeting. So I think, you know, with a little, you know, but to crunch you with a policy that says you have to do it,
It's a bit much,
a little
don't you
tough. I
think?
mean,
That's a
ideally,
bit
this is
much.
what you'd want, but to crunch it with like that just seems like a lot.
Particularly within a school where things are changing on a regular basis and something may come up on the day of when you're presenting the information that needs to be included, but it's not in your handout. I mean, you know, it's one thing if you're going to make a presentation to a county level, state level meeting, and handouts have to be prepared ahead of time and all that kind of thing. But when you're talking with in-house in a school, that seems a bit much.
So with this policy, would that mean that the agenda could not be adjusted within that 7-day time frame?
No, that's not true. If you make a motion to edit the agenda or add items or delete items from the agenda, you can do that at your board meeting. So that is something that's within the board's rights.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I take it that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to wait until the board meeting in order to make a change to the agenda. Like if the agenda comes out the week before, but 2 days later, we realize, oh, we need to add one more item, we're allowed to do that because the agenda's already been posted. We can modify as we need to. Is that fair?
Now,
or
that I would have to get more feedback and find more
Okay.
information about in terms of appropriately noticing the public. There are timelines that are there that
Okay.
are required, but I'm not really sure exactly where they lie. So I can look into that and get back to you as well.
That's a
And
great
that's
question.
something that's why we go through legal counsel as well, to make sure that they have the input there.
And so may I ask a question? Is this policy, I can't remember, I've read them all, but was this one specifically related to board meetings as opposed to in-house meetings? Like, for example, if we go
believe
to a
so.
faculty
I believe
meeting,
so.
you're talking about just board meetings? Okay,
Yes, board meeting.
okay.
Yeah, I would assume that that doesn't necessarily apply to special called meetings, but to regular standard monthly
I
board
think-
meetings.
I think you're right, Joanne. I want to say we are required to do a 48-hour notice
Right.
for special meetings. And then we pretty much have to stick to that agenda.
Right.
Right.
I'm sure it doesn't mean that those other rules don't apply, that we could make an addition to that agenda if we needed to during the meeting, as long as we did a motion that was carried, that was voted on and carried out. But I think we're under that 48-hour rule for special meetings.
I wonder if it would be worthwhile looking at some sort of policy about having in-person hybrid meetings. I know many years ago, our board used to allow call-ins for meetings. We had in-person meetings, but then people were allowed to do call-in votes, and it became really kind of sketchy. And we were told, Joanne, you might remember this. It was like 2003, maybe.
Yeah.
And then we put the kibosh on it. It was no, you have to be physically present at the meetings, which wouldn't happen now, but we have the Zoom option now. So I don't know what other boards are doing, if we even need to have some sort of policy about, do board members need to be present? Can a board member be on Zoom and people be present. It may just be, now that we're in this world of being hybrid or on Zoom, just start considering that. It allows people to, come more often. If somebody's out of town, they could still Zoom in, but how does that change the dynamic of the board if we're sitting at our computers versus in person as well? So I don't know if that actually, that would slow down the process right now, but that may be some forward thinking as far as how meetings are run right now. Do we allow people to Zoom in? Does that voting kind of happen that way? So I don't think that needs to happen now, but maybe thinking about looking at policies that way. Does that need to be written into policy, or is that just a procedure of how meetings are run as well?
I think that's a great idea, Sarah.
It's a great question, and I agree. It's definitely something that we'll want to explore as we are navigating a different environment that often is hybrid, and with the hopes of returning back to in-person meetings, I would imagine at some point that would be something we would want to discuss as well. Were there any other policy considerations with those two sections or the social media or COVID leave policy?
I just want to say I appreciate the COVID leave policy as a teacher. That was something that we went back and forth a lot. And at one point we're told as teachers, if we had COVID and wanted to work, we still had to pay for our substitute. And it was allowed this year that if we had COVID, we could Zoom in and teach if we wanted to, and the school paid for our sub. And as far as I know, no other schools are covering that for their teachers. So I really appreciate that as a teacher, and I think my colleagues do as well.
That's good. That's really good feedback. All right, if there is nothing else for Miss Susan on the policy stuff, going once, going twice. All right, we're approaching our 2-hour mark, so I want to make sure I take a moment to do a vote to extend for what we have left. I'd love to say 30 minutes, but I don't know if I'll be cutting that a little bit too short. So how do we feel about an hour? Or we can vote to move some things off the agenda if need be.
I move to extend it an hour.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think I heard Dr. Hill.
You did.
Okay, fantastic. Want to make sure I got somebody. All those in favor of extending an hour? Begrudgingly, I see. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carried. We can extend. All right, we've got to vote on mask in the last, I don't even know how many school days are left now. It's flying by. I'm sure someone out there is doing a countdown. But in these last few weeks of school, does anyone have any recommendations as far as keeping the current policy in place versus for mask, or questions, anything?
I believe it's in Danielle's report, director's report, but obviously the numbers matter. So would you like to share that now or later?
We had a little spike the week after the middle school dance, where we had 15 cases that week, and we're back to 0.
0 is always good. All right, so if there's nothing else, no questions. All right, we're ready for a motion to keep our current policy in place regarding mask mandate.
This is Tiffany. I'll make a motion to keep this policy the same, which I think is mask optional.
Thanks, Tiffany. Do I have a second?
Second.
Chuck jumped me, but there you go.
Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor of keeping the current mandate in place with mask optional? Anyone opposed? All right, motion carried. We will keep everything as is, status quo for now. All righty, moving on to board applications. It's that time of year. I know we've gotten a few applications. I know we've got some board members who are hardcore recruiting and some staff alike. And I know that it's not just voting members. I think we also have 2 staff positions that are also opening up on the board, but the staff pretty much takes care of that, as I understand it. It's the founder seat maybe that gets voted on, but other than that, the teachers take care of those seats. So that part is taken care of. As far as the voting positions, we have about 4 vacancies coming up, and we may or may not have folks who might be willing to stay for a while, even if it's begrudgingly. But assuming that doesn't happen, we spoke earlier a couple months or so ago about having this dilemma with having so many voting members, or just members period, rolling off. Again, we'll go through this in another 3 years at this rate, just like we did 3 years ago. So to avoid that dilemma going forward, we had talked about and seemed to have a bit of a consensus that we could vote in 2 more voting members for the upcoming year, and that would give us 5 voting members. And the policy states that we have to have 5 to 7 voting members on the board. So with 5 voting members, we're required to have at least 4 officer positions. We have to have a chair, a vice chair, treasurer, and a secretary. There's an optional position as a parliamentarian, but it hasn't been easy to get our 4 required positions filled for officers. With that being said, there would need to be a board vote to allow a new member to hold an officer position in the upcoming year. So that too will need to be added to our June agenda. So going forward, the board can revisit adding another member from year to year, however that fits in with however many are rolling off. Some board members may want to keep an odd number of members to avoid the possibility of split votes. But again, you can revisit, revise for all that good stuff. So with the application deadline now being June the 10th, June could kind of be a transition meeting. And Stephen, feel free to chime in if I misspeak or leave something out. But what we could do is allow candidates to come and do their 2 minutes speaking to the board. All the board candidates get a chance to do that at the beginning of a meeting. And there's a few minutes for Q&A. We can discuss with those candidates their feelings about holding an officer position, finding out what position they might have interest in holding. Then we would go to a closed session. The full board would discuss, and then voting members would meet, have their vote, and after the meeting, we would let the candidates know the decision, but allow the candidates in the June meeting. You know, if you're a candidate, you're allowed to hang out for this June meeting to kind of see how it goes. So in a way, it would be their transition meeting, just so they could get that experience. They wouldn't be able to speak, of course, or anything like that, but just so they could get a little bit of that transition time in. That's basically it, I do believe. Did I skip over anything? Dr. Hill, do you remember?
I'd have to, because of the timing, we might have to have a quick little special meeting, maybe a week later or so after the June meeting for electing officers, since we won't have announced who will be the officer or who will be the new people yet.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, with new members coming in, say one or both of them are more than willing to hold that officer position, we do our special called meeting. If you want to invite those candidates back to do their spiel, definitely more than welcome to, but they're not officially a part of the board until the next regular meeting, which will be in July. So just keep in mind that they can't really participate in that special called meeting. But in that special meeting, we can go ahead and kind of pencil in June the 28th. I think that's another Tuesday at 6. Hopefully that will be a short meeting just to vote in officers and talk about that. If you are interested in holding a position as an officer next year and you're going to be around next year, Amy, Lori, Stephen, let me know to put you on the ballot. And Stephen will, like say Stephen's on the ballot to be chair, say he gets chair. We might want to start thinking about that succession plan, you know, not holding that off till the end. So keep in mind that it might be a new board member. If they say that they are interested in a vice chair position, they could go on the ballot for that. Unless somebody else like Lori or Amy wants to battle it out for that because they want it. But that's just another option, just something for us to keep in mind so that we can keep our board filled or those positions filled the way that we need to in order to stay compliant.
Keisha, I have a couple of questions. Have the people that have applied, have they been thanked for applying and explained why we're not moving forward at this time?
Ooh, good question.
Since they applied in time and when they were asked to originally.
Yes, I can answer that.
There you go.
Unless you would like to, Dr. Hill.
No, I was about to say the same thing. You're going to go ahead. Go ahead. You've been the one replying, so go ahead.
Great.
Yes, I have been reaching out to the candidates who have applied for the board member applications, informing them of the extended deadline and that we will be following up with specific details about the June 21st meeting and the expectations for presentations then.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the other question, Susan, you may know this too. Are we, excuse me, are we holding the applications for a certain date, or I haven't received any applications to look at, to discuss? Are those coming out at a certain time?
I do not know the process answer to that. I think maybe someone else might be better able to answer that. I have not held them for any particular reason. I was just waiting until the June 10th deadline to ensure that we had all interested parties. And then we can go from there. I'm happy to follow a different process if that's typically the case.
Don't we usually wait till they're all in and then we send a packet out?
Remember doing that's
I
how
can't
we've done
remember.
it. I remember that's how we've done it in years past. What I can't remember is if that packet was like part of the agenda, or because we didn't necessarily want everyone's application floating out there. I can't remember how that went the last year or two, to be honest.
It was probably, they were probably separately sent. I mean,
Yeah.
in one packet, but not attached to anything else.
Yeah, I'm not sure they were in the agenda where other people could see them because
Right.
they come and do their presentation, and that's sort of what everybody that's on or used to be in real life, you know, got to see. So,
Kim, do you remember from last year?
Either
I
Kim's
don't
on
think they
mute.
were, I don't think they were attached.
Okay.
I mean, we could look back at the notes. I just don't remember, and we were remote, so.
Right.
It's been a long time since we were in real life. I feel like.
With the notebooks in front of us with all the printed copies.
I can check into this tomorrow and then get back to everybody.
That works. I appreciate that. I feel like we did everything at the end. I just don't remember all the little details behind that. So if everyone's cool with putting a little pencil in on the calendar for June 28th as a special meeting, just to make sure that we take care of that last piece of our board planning, that would be great. So now,
Seems to me, like Keisha, it seems to me we need a policy about how we vote on new board members. If the question is, how do we collect applications? Maybe that's a procedure, like the dates and how that happens. If we can't answer how we collect them, how we distribute them, how that process happens, that needs to be written down somewhere. So
yeah, I like
if we're
that
talking about
idea.
policy, I don't know if that, I just looked back in the policy that we were looking at and it's not anywhere. So again, I mean, that's the policy procedure question, but maybe we just write it down this time. Maybe it is written down
Sounds
somewhere.
like someone's
Maybe it is.
volunteering to do a draft.
Nope. Stephen.
You should have known that was coming. Oh, Sarah, you should have known that was
kind of
coming.
ambiguous, like in the, there's not
I'll
much.
send you an email. I'll write it down, Stephen, and then there we
That's
go.
fine.
I'll send it right now. Dear Mr. Doctor.
Whatever. It's
In a PowerPoint.
I get a lot of emails from you already, so.
Awesome. Anything else specific to board applications? All right, let's move on to board goals. I'm sure folks are tired of hearing me talk, so I don't mind passing that on to anyone who wants to go next. No pressure.
I see those in the, Danielle has them bullet pointed in her report, so. No,
Sorry.
I see the board goals are bullet pointed in your report.
Yes, here they are.
So I guess I'll go first. Mr. or Dr. Hill and I will go first and talk a little bit about the infamous 360 that I feel like we've been talking about for quite some time. So Susan, Stephen, and I have all been working on that 360 tool. And the reason for the 360 is because we don't have that traditional setup. Our school is a little bit different from other public schools in a lot of ways. And because, of course, board members aren't in the building every day, the 360 is a good way to help with the evaluation tool. So there are going to be 3 components. There's a director self-assessment, there is a board member assessment, and then there's a staff assessment. So the assessments come from some common 360 tools that are used in the United States. Is influenced by the Berkeley method, if you're at all familiar with that. it's been modified to fit our school structure. So for example, there were questions that didn't make sense for our school setting. So it was either modified or weeded out. But okay, so the first one, the director self-assessment, is just that. That's the director's opportunity to say how it's going. The board member assessment is for any board member that's not staff, but included in that assessment will be representation from PCN and the PTO. So a little bit of everybody there. The staff member assessment will include admin, support, teachers, TAs, custodial, just some of everyone to, again, encompass as many possibilities as possible. We just wanted to try and get in representation from all the stakeholders. So with that being said, there will be about 10 people or so in each of those last two groups. To keep it from being so many that is overwhelming and that is not as effective, but not too few that is also not effective. So 10 and about each group. The selection is going to be random and done by the exec team. So typically that'll be the chair and the vice chair. Director will submit a list of names to exec to say these are some folks I've worked with that might be willing to do that portion of the assessment. The exec team will also have their own list of names. So there may be some overlap, there may not. The director never gets to see the list from the exec team to keep everything blind on the end of anyone from the school. So there'll be like a soft rollout of the new tool in the mid-year of next school year, probably December, January-ish. And at that time, all three of those assessments will be rolled out, and that'll be done just like I described before, but that'll serve kind of like a mid-year eval for the director and an opportunity for setting a baseline, doing some goal setting, that sort of thing. But it'll be reviewed at year end when it's done again to do a comparison so that you can see growth and that sort of thing at the end of the year between the two. There's going to be a new policy for the director's eval. We're going to be introducing that director evaluation policy to the board for the first read. And then after that read, it goes on to legal for review with the intention that it'll be approved to the new policy as a new policy in the June meeting. So there might be a draft of that new policy. We try to keep it very simple, very vague. So that way, if for whatever reason, 360 gets changed, that sort of thing, whatever evaluation tool is used, it will be covered under the policy without having to change that policy. But it will encompass all of that. Stephen, did I miss anything with that, or Susan?
So I think that covered it pretty well from our conversation.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I have two questions.
Sure.
The first, and maybe I misheard you, you sorted the three categories of where we get the feedback, and you said that two would be completely random, but then I heard that lists will be submitted. I missed something in there. Is it random?
No, that's fine.
Or is it names are submitted?
It would be names that are submitted. So say if we were doing it this year, then Danielle would have a list of names of people she's worked with and done some projects with, whatever, and she submits those names to Stephen and myself. Stephen and I also have a list of some random people that we think would be good to do the survey. Danielle never sees anything. The only thing she sees is the list that she provides to us. So she has no idea if anyone on her list gets selected or not. And we choose who gets the assessment, and then they complete the assessment and it comes back to us. So no
how-
one else sees it.
Are you just going to draw names out of a hat? Like how we
It'll be, when I say random, it'll be encompassing all those groups. Like we'll make sure that we choose at least a couple of admin. There'll be at least a couple of teachers K through 5. There'll be at least a few teachers in this group. So that will be set in stone. So it won't be all middle school teachers or all support staff. It'll be at least 1 or 2 people from all the groups. So that way we've pretty much gotten a little bit of everything, a little bit from every group in our stakeholders.
Gotcha.
In the board member group, that's going to be members of PCN and PTO, as well as board members that are not staff. So say Sarah got an assessment, she will do hers as a staff member, not a board member.
Right. Okay, and my second question is something that you and I touched on earlier today. Is there an avenue for faculty and staff to give feedback if they want to? I'm sure people have things that they want to say, good and bad, indifferent. But if they want to, what is the avenue for that to reach the board?
We did chat on that a little bit. And I don't know, I guess in my mind, I always thought that that was part of the role of board teachers. I know for a while we also had the teacher report. But like in any company, like if I had an issue with my supervisor and it was not going well for whatever reason, and I went another level up, that would be my course of action. Just like if someone answers to a coordinator who's under Danielle and they're not getting what they need, or it's just not being resolved, they would go to Danielle. So,
Right.
I mean,
That makes sense, but in the spirit of what I understand, there hasn't been a safe space for sharing information, and I don't know if, I feel like not that the board wants to be inundated, and I'm not even talking about complaints, right? I'm talking about constructive feedback, touching base, climate kind of way. We're given information, right? And we can act on what is before us. And that's our job. And our job is not to get into the nitty gritty or manage or any of that. But in this 360, it just doesn't feel very 360 with 10 people. So is there, a way that we can somehow and I don't know how to do it. I haven't really thought this through. It's just, what is out there right now.
So Amy, are you thinking about something such as there's a box people can drop notes into? I mean,
yeah,
for
like
the board or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, not yet. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But a way, I feel like in the past, staff and faculty haven't felt heard and haven't felt like they had a voice with the board. And we've tried different ways to make that happen, and none of them quite seem to be fitting yet. And so, and now we've been promising this 360 evaluation before I even came on the board. And I understand the reasons why we're delaying it a year. But that's one more year that it's been pushed off, and maybe people aren't feeling like they're being heard. And Danielle, I'm not coming down on you or like, hey, let's evaluate.
No,
I'm just, I just, the flow of information feels stunted.
I think though that, just one thing to consider is that the 360 isn't meant to be the avenue for all communication
Right.
about that individual. So it's meant to be a selection of stakeholders to help the person grow and improve. So it's really not the avenue for grievance, for example. That's supposed to come through a different avenue. So if there's a problem, and if there's a problem with communication, we need to look at that as a separate issue from a 360, because it starts to become very convoluted when you do that, and that's really not the purpose of it. And what they're giving you is really like the best practice in school leadership 360. It's not, you don't send a survey out to absolutely everyone.
Right. I mean, and now that I understand better, now that it is what the 360 is, has clarified over the course of this year and this process, I get that. But there's still this perception that we're not hearing people.
Are you hearing this from a lot of different people?
A number of them. I wouldn't.
But is that an issue, like Danielle was saying? Is that an issue that is in a director's evaluation for growth in areas that the people that are out there making that comment probably don't know anything about? You know what I'm saying? Whereas, as Danielle said, if it's a communication issue, that's a separate issue that needs to be addressed in and of itself.
The only thing that I would say to that is that in the context of our school and in the context of shared leadership, which I still struggle to fully understand, and my own research, I've read a lot about it. I think that you guys fight an uphill battle. Like, I think that the school fights an uphill battle with making it work for CFCI. And I understand we're a special place and that it has evolved over the years. I think it takes a lot of work to make it work right. And I don't. So when you are evaluating, I don't know, if it's just a climate, like a climate survey, or just, hey, is everybody doing okay?
We did a climate survey
what
before.
What can we do about it? What did you say?
Stephen, we have.
I would be down with doing it, on a regular basis. I mean, I know that's not the only path for people to provide feedback, but we got some pretty good feedback with that. I mean, pretty interesting, thoughtful feedback.
With what, Stephen? I didn't hear.
With the climate survey.
Yeah.
There is a climate survey that was just done that's going to be available June 1st.
The results will be available June 1st?
Yeah, from my understanding, it's a state survey that's done every 2 years. And so this was the year to do that. It's a climate survey. I don't know if you've in past years seen the results or not, but I know they're all released to every single school on June 1st.
I think, Stephen, you're referring to the one that the board sent out just to CFCI teachers for CFCI specifically.
Right. It's been a while. Everything's a blur. It was pre-pandemic, but probably
yeah,
2018, 2019, somewhere in there.
I think it was Fran, I think that was our first year on the board, right? Yeah.
And there was, as I remember it, a lot going on at that time. And it was a telling survey, but it also was very tough in that environment. It was, in my personal opinion, I didn't feel like it was well received by everyone. And I don't know if
well received by everyone, as in
understand
that comment.
When it went out, it just it wasn't entirely welcomed by everyone. Like some felt, I don't know if offended is the right word, but it definitely raised some eyebrows. It was off-putting for some people. And
Why?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't really know. I just know it. And I was really new in the board then. It wasn't long after Ashley left, and I don't remember all the logistics, but it was a very tense time.
I mean, it
And
was.
I certainly don't want that.
I don't know
to come
that.
back.
I don't know that the survey would have like jostled it that much. That was just a really hard time.
That was my perspective. I'm saying my perspective of it. It felt like it caused a lot of a stir in a lot of different directions, and it did not help in some relationships. And I don't know. I feel like the 360 is a totally different thing. I think the 360 offers a lot of growth if it's approached correctly. It's meant to be constructive.
Yeah, I'm just talking about a general, like, I want to make sure that people understand what we are doing on this side of things and that we are hearing them directly. And I think that that would help with that, because again,
I don't disagree. I do feel like sometimes when we're trying to get everyone heard, it's really hard, because how do you make people feel heard? It can be subjective without being off-putting for some. Some feel like, well, she heard her, but she didn't hear me, or it's just a struggle.
Even if we do nothing with it, at least we asked the question and we got the feedback, and we move forward as a board with more insight. I mean, it's just, that's where I'm coming from. And I don't know, board teachers, do you want to?
You mind if I jump in for a second?
Please.
One of the things that comes to mind for me is, I think one of the problems we run into a lot in this situation is, I think you're right, Amy, that people are definitely looking for avenues to communicate to the board, regardless of the year. What we tend to do is wait for a problem to happen, and then we scramble for a way to communicate. So I think that's what happened with the teacher report. Is it wasn't a great time at our school, and we developed this plan, which we thought was a great idea, but made people uncomfortable because it developed because there was a problem. I think we start a strategy now that happens every year, regardless of the context. I think that would make people much more comfortable with the process.
Thank you for articulating that, because that is exactly what I'm going for. Something that a regular avenue.
It becomes a part of board procedure. And maybe it's how we do pre-post tests on kids. Maybe we do one at the beginning of the year and one at the end of the year.
You know what would be really great is if the 360 philosophy was something we adopted as a whole school. So for example, teachers also getting feedback from all their stakeholders. So from kids, from parents, just the same way, also administrators, myself included, we would all get feedback from the people that we're supporting so that we can all grow in the same way.
Agreed. But
that's a great idea.
You're out from it. Like, do we have to wait to do, if we implement it community wide, do we have to wait? Like,
Well, we're not doing the 360 this year, so it is something that could be developed for the following year.
And do a climate survey in the meantime.
Amy, I don't understand why the climate survey that's already done is not going to provide the information, or at least why don't we check to see if it provides information before we do that again?
Danielle, I think the confusion with that one is the climate survey that you're referring to is more of a commentary on the conditions in the state as a whole. I think Amy's looking for one specific just to our school.
Right.
And then what will we do with that information? What's the purpose in doing that?
Insight. That's all.
Well,
And
how do the people that are
if there's something really
feedback, in other words, if
oh, sorry. I'm just saying, like, if there's something really positive that catches our eye, we can reward that, just even with public accolade. If there's something that raises a red flag, then that's the conversation that we have.
Okay.
But then people feel heard, and people, like, some of the feedback that I get as a board member is, I don't understand why the board didn't act on this. Well, the board doesn't even know about it. Like, that's not how it works, you know, and not saying that we would act on anything, but maybe we have a conversation, right? Like, but
my question back on this point is this, because communication is so back and forth in order for the person that is wanting to be heard, and these are the people that would fill out this survey, okay, all of them. How are we going to be able to ensure that they feel like they've been heard? You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's just really just having, I don't know that everybody needs an email back or a call or a conversation. It's just, hey, here is an avenue. This is, we're going to do this a couple times a year. Check in, the board wants to have their finger on the pulse of the school, which I thought is part of our purpose anyway, and ensure that people within our community, and again, I'm going back to that whole shared leadership, everybody's involved in everything. I don't want to be like all up in anybody's business. I just think that it would be good for us to have just a feel of good and bad. Like, now I'm not looking for a new grievance policy. If it's a grievance, it needs to go through the grievance procedure. I'm a stickler for that. But if it's just a climate, like, hey, what's the feel? What's the vibe? Again, even if we don't act on anything that we get back, at least we know, at least people know that we know, right? And that we've read what we've read, or we've heard what we've heard, and I do like the idea that Danielle said about implementing 360, community-wide in ways, if we can. I think that's great. And it's just more transparency, more conversation, and more insight.
So Amy, it sounds like kind of what started this was with the 360, it was a grouping of people, which makes sense because you don't want every single absolute person giving input into an evaluation. Right. But on the flip side, you want to be able to get a feeling, just a general climate of how things are running, so that the board has an informed idea of how are things going, because you're not in the building every single day. So not as part of an evaluation, but the board is charged with making sure this school is running smoothly, so that in the end, the students are being successful and thriving. So we're almost talking about two different things. How do we get a general feeling, just a way for, I think what you're talking about is faculty, staff, the grown-ups in the building, to be able to give quick feedback that you can crunch numbers, Google form, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, that you just get a general. And then there's this other piece, which is part of the director, whoever is there, right? That is a more pointed piece of growth where there's more steps, specific things, that is then the talking point, the growth part of the contract renewal. So we're talking about two different pieces, both of which I think are necessary and both have very valuable elements to them. So is that kind of where we are in the conversation?
Grant are the teachers. You just say it.
I have a question about the 360. Danielle's introduced kind of to our faculty like 3 different language. Like, is this for information, input, or consensus? So when we're talking about this 360, as the executive committee, are you giving us information? This is the 360 that's been decided upon. Are you asking for input? This is what we've proposed. What's your input? Are you asking for, here's what it is, consensus as a board, put your hands on this, or faculty, this is what we're proposing. Where are you in this process?
In this process, I mean, I'm never going to turn down input. But this is what executive has come up with us, as well as Susan. Susan's been really helpful with her HR experience and knowledge. But if we can get that new policy in place, voted in our June meeting, the actual 360 can be ready come July to start being utilized then. So if we were going to say, well, let's get some faculty input and that sort of thing, honestly, it would take at least another X amount of months for us to even get right here. Like we are closer now to 360 than we have ever been. I can taste it. And I can't even tell you how good that is after working on this. Like when I first started, we were talking about 360 and the last chair wanted, vice chair wanted, that was the mission, but, hurricanes, new hires and pandemic put that on the back burner. So I kind of took that on and been arm in arm with Dr. Hill to say, let's try and get this done. So to be this close to it, I would hate to put another hit pause button on it again. So my thoughts, and Stephen may feel very differently, is that we're ready. Like once we get this policy actually approved, we've got a tool that is ready to be used. But Stephen, that's just me. You might feel differently.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Ready, we ready to move forward.
Any other questions on 360? All right. I'm checking in because we're at 8:36 and I know we have someone waiting to go into a closed session with us. So just in respect for everybody's time, but especially our guest time, I want to ask for a motion to jump ahead to our closed session if no one minds.
I think, Lakeisha, you're actually there because the draft of the director evaluations policy is attached in C, and it's just for a first read for people to have. So I think you're actually at the right place right now.
Fantastic. I know I have skipped board goals updates for others.
Oh, yep.
So other than that, I mean, if no one is chomping at the bit for that, and if you're okay with that being pushed maybe to June. All right.
I so move.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I need a second just to make sure we're official on that point.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Fantastic. All right, so now I need a motion to go into closed session on a personnel matter with Danielle, Kelly. No, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. Donna, who else do we need? Is that it?
I think so.
You're not taking all voting members then?
Right.
Yes.
Since this is
Okay.
personnel,
Okay.
it's going to be voting members only along with those names.
Okay, I'm assigning now.
So do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Make a motion to enter into closed session for, are we saying attorney consultation?
And personnel.
Matters. Okay.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Motion carried. welcome back, friends. All right, if there are no objections, I'd love to have a motion to push remaining agenda items to the June agenda. We can read our director's report and then reach out to Danielle or whomever else with questions and call it a night. Can I have a motion
Yes,
to
yes, you
adjourn?
may. Yes, you absolutely
Second.
can.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Get the heck out of here, people. Good